This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B306. Be sure to stay connected with live sessions, catch up on past meetings, and explore our full archives anytime on the Senate of Virginia's YouTube channel. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B306. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B306. Be sure to stay connected with live sessions, catch up on past meetings, and explore our full archives anytime on the Senate of Virginia's YouTube channel. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B306. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B306. Be sure to stay connected with live sessions, catch up on past meetings, and explore our full archives anytime on the Senate of Virginia's YouTube channel. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B306. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B306. Be sure to stay connected with live sessions, catch up on past meetings, and explore our full archives anytime on the Senate of Virginia's YouTube channel. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B306. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B 306. Be sure to stay connected with live sessions, catch up on past meetings, and explore our full archives anytime on the Senate of Virginia's YouTube channel. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B 306. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B306. Be sure to stay connected with live sessions, catch up on past meetings, and explore our full archives anytime on the Senate of Virginia's YouTube channel. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B306. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B 306. Be sure to stay connected with live sessions, catch up on past meetings, and explore our full archives anytime on the Senate of Virginia's YouTube channel. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia.
Good morning. I like to be in church. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, all right. Thank you all so very much for being here this morning, and welcome to our first JLARC meeting in the interim. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. Do we need to call a roll, or do we go right into the agenda?
We can go right in.
Okay. All right. Our first item on the agenda is the election of a chair and a vice chair, and I will open the roll for nomination of chair.
Madam Senator Locke, I nominate Senator Locke to be chair.
Is there a
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further nominations? Okay. Do I carry my own, or do it?
Well, I guess ask someone, call for the vote, I guess.
Jeremy?
I'd call for the nomination to close and call for the vote.
Second.
Aye.
All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, aye. Those opposed? All right, congratulations, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have at it.
Thank you, I think. Thank you all very much for that. And the next item will be the election of a vice chair. I will open the roll for vice chair.
Madam Chair, I'd like to nominate Delegate Carr.
Second.
All in favor of any further nominations? All in favor of Delegate Carr as vice chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? I hear the voice from afar. I believe that is Senator McDougal. Okay.
Sorry, I had to download a new app to get this to work.
Thank you, Senator McDougal. Okay, so Delegate Carr will be our vice chair. Congratulations, Delegate Carr. Okay, so thank you also very much. So we will get right into our business. We appreciate that quick election of chair and vice chair. We have quite a bit of work to get through this morning for our work plans for both JLARC and APA. So I will now turn it over to you to take over and give us what we have to do this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair, very much. And good morning, Madam Chair and Madam Vice Chair and members of the commission. And welcome to the first commission meeting of 2026. And a special welcome to our new members, Delegates Price, Reed, and Thomas. I'm Hal Greer, the staff director. And Madam Chair, we have two items on the agenda this morning. First, JLARC staff will present the JLARC work plan for the 2026 calendar year. And then next, the Auditor of Public Accounts and one of her deputies will present their work plan for the coming fiscal year. And now, Madam Chair, to the presentation of the JLARC work plan. You may recall that it's typical practice to present the work plan at the May meeting of JLARC each year to give the Commission a fuller sense of the work that the staff is undertaking in the current year on the studies that you have directed us to do. This meeting also serves as an opportunity for members of the Commission to provide input on the issues that you believe are especially important to address in conducting the research on the topics that you've assigned us. It's also a chance for you to ask us any questions that you have about any of the studies. With the exception of the judicial allocation study, which was directed by a joint resolution, the major studies that we're currently conducting were directed by this commission last fall. Each of the associate directors will describe the studies under their supervision, and then the project leader for each study will provide you with an overview of their study. We'll also share with you the ongoing oversight that we'll be undertaking this year. With that, Justin Brown will lead off. Justin?
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. As Hal said, my name is Justin Brown. I'm one of the Associate Directors here at JLARC. And the first two projects that we're going to talk about are listed here on the slide. I'm going to start with Lauren Excel. She's leading our review of the Virginia Agricultural Best Management Practices Cost Share Program. And that program tries to incentivize agricultural producers to use environmentally friendly practices, things like planting cover crops in between planting seasons to reduce runoff, by reimbursing farmers for some or all of the cost. Next, I'll have Mark Gribben come up, and he's leading our review of the state's judicial allocation formula, and that determines how many judges the state needs in total and how many are kind of allocated to the district and circuit courts. So I'll now ask Lauren to come up and give you a summary of our plans for the Agricultural Cost Share Program review. Lauren?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. As Justin said, I'm Lauren Axel, and I'll be leading our review of the Virginia Agricultural Best Management Practices Cost Share Program, also known as VAX. Some of you may already be familiar with VAX, but if you aren't, it provides funding to implement best practices to reduce non-point source pollution on agricultural land. Non-point source pollution comes from multiple sources rather than single sources like sewage treatment plants or industrial discharge pipes. We plan to share our findings with you for the study in September. Our study resolution directs us to review several things related to VAX, including the assessment that's completed biennially to identify high priority areas for non-point source pollution reduction, the criteria and processes used to allocate funds to local soil and water conservation districts and projects, VAX contract development and awards, the quality of technical assistance provided by districts to farmers, and compliance with program guidelines and requirements. To give you a bit of background, VAX pays at least some of the cost of farmers to reduce non-point source pollution specifically nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment in state waters. The program was created in the 80s and is critical to Virginia's Chesapeake Bay pollution reduction goals. Farmers implement best management practices like cover crops, riparian buffers, and livestock stream exclusion structures to reduce non-point source pollution. Virginia's Department of Conservation and Recreation works closely with Virginia's 47 local soil and water conservation districts to administer the VAX program. Just two more pieces of background. Virginia appropriated $223 million in fiscal year 2026 for VAX, an amount that's grown significantly over time. 70% of VAX funds are currently allocated to areas within the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and the remaining 30% goes to areas outside of the watershed, often called southern rivers. There are several issues that our team will focus on for this study, including assessing whether VAX funding levels and allocations across districts are reasonable and based on a data-driven process, identifying the intent of the VAX program and assessing how well it's designed, determining how effectively VAX is implemented and how much it contributes to Chesapeake Bay pollution reduction goals, and evaluating how effectively VAX is coordinated with other similar state and federal programs. This slide shows the various research activities that we will complete for this study. To highlight a few, we will be interviewing various stakeholders at the state and local level, as well as subject matter experts. We will also analyze data from DCR and local districts on VAX trends, awards, and project results. And we will distribute several surveys to local district staff, board members, and producers to collect feedback on opportunities to improve VAX design and implementation. And Madam Chair, I'll stop here, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions with regard to the agricultural study? I think Delegate Reed.
Yes, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I did have a question about the approach that you're planning on using. What year will you use as the baseline to be able to determine whether or not that the BMP program has had a positive impact on the reducing the nutrients in the Chesapeake Bay?
Delegate Reed, thank you for that question. We're going to be looking over at least back the past decade to see what types of practices were implemented and awarded then, and then we'll be seeing what the various pollution reduction levels were each year that the program was in existence in the recent years and as far back as a decade at least.
Delegate Ware.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lauren, as I talk to farmers in my district, one of the things that they bring up pretty continuously is the uneven nature of funding by us. So I hope as you go through that, if you could be cognizant of that and give us a sense of the trend line of that. I know we've done very well in recent years, but I think that inconsistency is something that is a challenge for farmers who are attempting to cooperate with us on that score.
Delegate Ware, thank you. We will certainly be happy to provide that kind of information. We're going to be looking at the funding levels that went to the cost share, the projects themselves, as well as the funding that goes for technical assistance for the staff at these districts, and we'll make sure to look at the trends over time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any additional questions? Okay. If not, thank you, Lauren.
Thank you. Now I will turn it over to Mark Ribbon to discuss the next study.
Good morning, Madam Chair. I'm Mark Ribbon. I'm leading up the study team looking at judicial allocations. This study will be presented at the December JLARC meeting. This study came from SJ 259 and passed in the 2025 session. The resolution basically directs JLARC staff to look at how the state determines the number of circuit and district court judges that we need, with special emphasis on studies that have been done by the National Center for State Courts, or NCSC, and court practices related to efficiency. For background, there are currently 447 authorized circuit and district court judgeships in the state, and I believe recent legislation will add 6 more in July of next year. The state pays the salaries and benefits of these judges at a cost of around $300,000 to $330,000 per judge. The General Assembly sets the number of judges for the state, and those decisions are informed by periodic assessments of judicial workloads by NCSC. The General Assembly directs NCSC studies and the budget through the Office of the Executive of the Secretary of the Supreme Court. NCSC studies were performed in 2013, 2017, and most recently in 2024. NCSC is a nonprofit organization that provides a number of research and consulting services for states and court systems, with one of those being workload studies. Our preliminary research suggests that most of the judge workload studies that have been done in the U.S. in recent years have been done by NCSC. They use a weighted caseload methodology, which basically looks to account for the fact that some cases take up more time than others. For example, a contested divorce case is going to take up a lot more of a judge's time than an uncontested divorce because of all the additional hearings and motions, and especially if it goes to trial. While NCSC leads most of the work on these studies, the studies are guided by panels of Virginia judges. That panel is responsible for making key decisions, such as approving the numbers that go into the final calculations of judge needs. The NCSC studies ultimately result in an estimate of the number of judges that are needed to handle workloads in each circuit and district. Studies are then passed to two Virginia judicial policy-making bodies, the Judicial Council and the Committee on District Courts, which use those study results to inform their recommendations to the General Assembly. The first two NCSC studies in 2013 and 2017 resulted in judge need estimates that were fully adopted by the state. You can see that with the matching bars there at the top. However, as you can see from the mismatched bars at the bottom, in 2024, the estimates from that study were not adopted by the Assembly. And lawmakers have raised some questions about that study's methods, data, and including how well it accounted for differences in case complexity across courts and different court practices. So for this study, one of the main things we'll be looking at are the potential limitations, if any, of past judicial needs studies, including the data and the methods that were used. We'll also examine how the judicial needs studies done for Virginia compared to those that have been done in other states, including looking at their overall design and how they collected and used information. Next, we'll look at if and how, if at all, variations in court practices across the state might affect judge workloads and the data that are used in these workload studies, including if best practices are being used by courts. Finally, we'll look at what changes, if any, should be made to improve future workload studies and the state's judicial allocation process as a whole. We'll also look at how court practices could be changed through the lens of facilitating better judge efficiency and improving quality and consistency of court data. We have a number of research activities planned and underway, including reviewing studies performed for other states, gathering and reviewing data and documents from NCSC on past Virginia studies, and meeting with judges, clerks, and others in circuits and districts across the state. Madam Chair, I'll pause there if there are any questions from you or the Commission.
Any questions with regard to this, the judicial study? Well, you got off easy.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
I'll turn it over.
Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I had the button pressed, I thought.
Really?
Yes.
Delegate Reed.
I'm getting used to the Senate buttons.
Delegate Reed.
Thank you. But Mr. Rippon, this is something that I know that we have tried to address for, it seems like, multiple years now. And particularly, I think on your previous slide, slide 15, you talk about the variation of court practices across the Commonwealth. And I'm going to borrow from a phrase that we've often used with electric co-ops, where if you've seen one judicial district, you've seen one judicial district. Because I think that they count the court cases and the workload differently. And coming from Loudoun County, I know that this has been a source of frustration for the circuit court judges there on a regular basis, because something that might count as one case in Loudoun County might count as 5 cases in some other county. So I'm really interested to see what it is that you're going to come up with to be able to kind of work across all of that and come up with a common framework for being able to capture those metrics so that we in the General Assembly then can then make informed decisions about what the workload is for the judges.
Thank you, Delegate Reed. Yes, we are well aware of that issue, especially at the circuit court level, where there's a little more flexibility in the practices that are employed because clerks are, of course, constitutional officers, and so have more leeway in the practices that the court uses and how data is filed. We've also heard Commonwealth's attorneys can have different charging practices, which could also affect data. So we're well aware of those issues, and we have a number of things planned to address that, including looking at the data, then identifying courts that might look a little different, and going in and really understanding the practices that are at play.
One follow-up question, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Do you plan, as part of your recommendations, to then provide us with insight on how we should be directing the courts to assess and calculate all of the work that they do, so that going forward from this point, when you provide the report, that we'll have a standard way of measuring workload across the entire Commonwealth?
Delegate, I think I can't speak to what our recommendations would be, but if we do find that there's a lot of data inconsistency out there and that's hindering the state's ability to effectively figure out how many judges we need, I can certainly see there being recommendations or policy options to that effect.
Delegate Price.
Thank you. I was looking at the slide for background where it said that questions were raised after the 2024 assessment. Just because I was not here, are there any examples of questions that were raised about that assessment? And then also, I guess, what role do you think may have like new legislation about how trials can go, or the backlog from COVID? Like, since 2020, do you think that there are any things that we need to look at specifically from our point of view, and will that be a part of what you all are looking at?
Delegate Price, to your first point, I think some of the points that Delegate Reed raised are similar to the concerns that were raised about that we have different practices across courts, and there could be issues with the data that's being put into the formulas. So I'd probably dig up some more, but that's probably the main concern that came up. In terms of what additional work we would do looking at court practices, I think this isn't a full study of courts and court deficiencies. We're kind of looking at practices through that lens of how does it affect judge workloads, judge efficiency, and court data. So I would anticipate we would have some findings and potential recommendations or options related to court practices through that lens, but not a sort of a broader look at courts as a whole, or what staffing needs and funding needs for courts should be.
Any additional questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. It's good to be with you this morning. My name is Tracy Smith, and I have two studies under my supervision this year. The first was it's the assisted living and in-home care study and the oversight of Medicaid managed care. The first was initially going to focus solely on assisted living facilities, and it grew out of concerns about how well the state is ensuring their quality. These concerns were at least partially fueled by the issues that had come to light recently about some of Virginia's nursing homes. The Commission then asked that we expand the study to include a review of in-home care after stakeholders voiced concerns about the availability and oversight of those services as well. Home care organizations are licensed by the same office within VDH that licenses nursing homes. The second study is a very expansive study, Madam Chair, of how well the state, through DMAS, is overseeing the Medicaid managed care organizations. These MCOs are responsible for most of Virginia's Medicaid program. Virginia Medicaid has gone through some pretty significant changes in recent years, as you know, including expansion, the impacts of the pandemic, and a shift to most members being served through managed care. The team is planning to examine how effective managed care has been for members as well as for the state, and how well DMAS has overseen the MCO's performance. There have also been some recent frustrations with the Medicaid expenditure forecasts, and the team will evaluate that process as well. Madam Chair, I'll ask Joe McMahon to come up and brief you on the assisted living and in-home services study. Joe?
Thank you, Tracy. Good morning, Madam Chair. As Tracy said, my name is Joe McMahon, and I'll be discussing our review of assisted living and in-home services for Virginia's aging population. Our study resolution asks us to do the following: determine the number of assisted living and non-medical in-home service providers, their capacity, and their costs, and to do that by region and by whether they accept public funding. We're directed to estimate shortages by service type and identify reasons for those shortages. Summarize what is known about the quality of services being provided and factors that contribute to poor quality. And finally, we're evaluating the effectiveness of the state's quality assurance mechanisms such as regulation, oversight, and enforcement. For some background, as Virginia's population ages, demand is increasing for services at home or at assisted living facilities. The older population is projected to increase statewide, and certain regions of the state, particularly South Side and Southwest, have the greatest proportion of aging residents. There have been concerns expressed about availability and affordability of services. We've heard about scarcity of providers in some regions of the state. There's relatively little public assistance for many of these services. And there's a middle market, which are those individuals with too much income or assets to qualify for public assistance, but not enough to afford private pay rates. Assisted living and in-home care are important because they can help prevent or delay the need for older Virginians to receive more expensive or intensive care. Both assist adults with activities of daily living and medication management. In-home care also assists with tasks such as managing finances, cooking, shopping, or transportation. I want to note that while both skilled nursing and in-home medical care are important components of this aging continuum, they're excluded from this study because the focus is on non-medical services. Here's some other details from our early research. For assisted living, the median monthly cost is nearly $7,000. The auxiliary grant is the primary public assistance program for assisted living. The auxiliary grant rate is set by the General Assembly and currently covers less than the cost of a typical facility. On the other hand, in-home care costs are not well or uniformly documented, but are likely much cheaper than assisted living. We do know that Medicaid spends about $3,200 per month for each recipient of home care covered by Medicaid's Commonwealth Coordinated Care Plus, or CCC Plus, waiver. Finally, in the area of regulation and oversight, state law requires VDSS to inspect assisted living facilities at least once per year. Their inspectors also respond to complaints, and VDSS has enforcement actions it can take in response to noncompliance. The Department of Health Professions, Board of Long-Term Care Administrators, licenses assisted living facility administrators as part of a separate process. And VDH oversees healthcare organizations that provide in-home services. We know that VDH currently has a backlog of inspections for those providers. Here's some of the key questions we'll answer. What is the supply and affordability of assisted living and in-home care in Virginia? To what extent are Virginia's assisted living facilities providing safe and quality care? What factors contribute to unsafe or poor quality assisted living conditions? How well does the state perform its role in ensuring quality? And what steps could be taken to increase the supply, quality, and affordability of these services? And finally, our research activities are here. Some primary ones to mention are interviews with state and local agency staff and key stakeholder groups. We'll be analyzing data on the cost and supply of assisted living and in-home care services, doing demographic analysis to measure current and future demand. We plan to do several surveys, including with assisted living facility administrators across the state and the staff at VDSS that conduct facility inspections. And finally, we'll assess how Virginia's regulations compare to other states. That concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, Delegate Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. McMahon. This is part of my day job, so just have two questions, if that's all right with you, Madam Chair. First one will be, do you plan to capture the existence and prevalence of group homes as well in your study? Because that's been a really good solution in other states I have seen outside of just nursing and then also in-home care. And then my second question would be, within the in-home care calculation of how much of it we have, will you also be looking at registries, care registries, and hybrid care registries, which is a growing aspect of the industry nationwide?
Thank you, Delegate Thomas. The primary cutoff for what we're looking at on the assisted living side is that assisted living facility definition, which is 4 or more individuals licensed with the state as an assisted living facility. But there is a supply component of this study that we'll be looking at potentially other practices in other states are already going on in Virginia, where I could see us at least understanding what those group homes are, how they fit into this puzzle of providing enough supply. I think the same can be said with the examples you gave of other options on the in-home care. So those are something we'll be aware of. We won't be assessing them as thoroughly on the quality affordability side, but to the point where they fit in that supply puzzle, I think we will include that.
Delegate Wilk.
Thank you, Madam. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 20 of your presentation, the bullet third there said that Southside and Southwest Virginia has the greatest proportion of aging residents. What did you use to determine that proportionality on that?
That is actually pulling from our JLARC demographic study that we did, I think, last year. That is census data, American Community Survey data, looking at the overall population and then what proportion of the population is over a certain age. 60 or 65, I think, is the definition there.
On slide 23, it's noted that VDH has a backlog of inspections. Will your study capture the nature of those backlogs and what will be done to try to overcome that?
Madam Chair, yes, that is something we will definitely be looking at and including.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I will turn it over to Stephanie Papps.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Stephanie Papps, and I'm the project leader for our review of oversight of the Medicaid Managed Care Program. We're planning to brief this study to you in December of this year. The Commission adopted the resolution directing this study last December, asking us to evaluate how well the Department of Medical Assistance Services, or DMAS, oversees the managed care program and MCOs. The resolution asks us to look at a few specific items listed on this slide and the next, which include DMAS's approach to ensuring recipients have access to care, extent to which the MCOs are paid based on outcomes and quality of care, how DMAS ensures that recipients receive medically appropriate care while also detecting and preventing overutilization, inefficiencies, fraud, waste, and abuse, DMAS's approach to financial oversight, rate setting, and forecasting, and opportunities to improve the quality and efficiency of service delivery and facilitate budget predictability. Slides 29 and 30 provide a little bit of background on Medicaid and the managed care program. The most recent forecast of Medicaid spending predicted an $8.6 billion increase in total spending in the FY 27-28 biennium. When we look at the forecast for just state general funds, it predicted a $2.7 billion increase in the next biennium. Virginia spends more per average Medicaid member than most other states. Virginia spends an average of $9,600 per average member compared to a national average of $7,400. Virginia ranks 8th nationally for spending, with just 6 states and DC spending more. Spending in Virginia Medicaid is driven by services for older adults and people with disabilities. They make up around 15% of the membership, but account for almost half of spending. Virginia's Medicaid enrollment peaked in mid-2023, largely because of federal requirements associated with the public health emergency that required states to maintain continuous eligibility throughout the pandemic. Medicaid enrollment has been declining since that time. Managed care has largely replaced the older fee-for-service model. Under the old fee-for-service model, DMAS directly paid for Medicaid member benefits. Beginning in the 1990s, Virginia began introducing managed care. Under managed care, the state contracts with private insurance companies called MCOs to administer Medicaid benefits to recipients. This model effectively shifts the risk to the MCOs because the state pays a fixed monthly payment to the MCOs for each recipient they cover, and the MCOs are responsible for each recipient's claims. The most recent expansion of managed care occurred in 2018 when older adults and individuals with disabilities who use long-term services and supports were moved into managed care. Since that time, over 90% of Virginia Medicaid members are covered through managed care. Managed care is supposed to provide benefits to both the state and recipients. When MCOs and managed care programs are effectively overseen and managed, they can help control costs, improve health outcomes, and ensure efficient and effective use of public dollars. To address the resolution, our team is planning to address the following questions. What's driving Medicaid spending increases, and how well does DMAS identify and address those causes? How well does DMAS ensure that Medicaid members receive good customer service from their MCOs? How well does DMAS ensure that the MCOs secure appropriate and medically necessary services for members and that MCOs minimize inefficient or unnecessary service utilization? Do DMAS policies and oversight ensure that members can access care and that providers participate in MCO networks? How well does DMAS ensure capitation rates accurately reflect MCO operational cost and that its MCO payment policies promote efficiency and good member outcomes? To what extent are DMAS's forecasts reliable, methodologically rigorous, and transparent? And does DMAS have the staff, organization, and strategy to effectively manage and oversee the managed care program? Finally, slide 33 summarizes just a few of the research activities that our team is planning to conduct as part of this study. Those activities include interviewing DMAS and MCO staff at other states' Medicaid agencies, and national experts, analyzing data on spending, claims, provider activity, member outcomes, and satisfaction in DMAS staffing, surveying DMAS staff and providers, reviewing a sample of care management and service denial files, and then reviewing a variety of documentation, including that on rate setting, forecasting, and MCO compliance. Madam Chair, I'll pause here for any questions.
Are there any questions with regard to this study? Delegate Price.
Thank you. Looking at the statement that Virginia's Medicaid enrollment peaked in May 2023 and has declined since, I understand that the Medicaid expansion would have driven new enrollees up, but then we're hoping that those same people that were eligible would keep reapplying as necessary. So is that a decline in new enrollees, or is that a decline in total enrollment?
Delegate Price, thank you for the question. So when it comes to enrollment, the enrollment in the Medicaid program was going up because of expansion, which started in 2019. And so it started to increase as a result of that. But then when we hit the pandemic in March of 2020, the federal government required all Medicaid agencies to maintain continuous eligibility for anyone who was on the program as of March of 2020. So during that time from March of 2020 all the way through April of 2023, no one was coming off of the Medicaid program, even if they were no longer eligible. So starting in April of 2023, that's when the agency started with, under federal regulations, they had to start unwinding and checking eligibility again. And so people started coming off the rolls at that point. And so we would have expected at that point we'd see people coming off because their eligibility criteria likely changed.
Any additional questions with regard to this study? All right. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Next up is Kimberly Sarte.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good morning, Madam Chair. I am Kimberly Sarte, and I'm JLARC's third Associate Director. The work under my supervision this year includes JLARC's review of artificial intelligence in the Commonwealth, the ongoing evaluation and oversight that JLARC provides for the General Assembly, and the fiscal analysis services that we provide. I would now like to introduce Drew Dickinson, who is a project leader for the AI study.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. As Kimberly mentioned, my name is Drew Dickinson, and I'll be leading our AI study this year. We plan to brief the results of our study to you in October. The study comes from a Commission resolution that was approved last December. That resolution directs us to review the use, governance, regulation, and oversight of AI in the Commonwealth. Specifically, it directs us to review the use of AI in Virginia state government, including both the opportunities and the risks. whether state agency staff have the skills necessary to use AI effectively, state policies and procedures guiding AI use, options for a governance structure for oversight of AI as it evolves, as well as AI-related legislation in other states. It also directs us to review AI use outside of state government that may require state regulation, as well as factors affecting AI costs and availability. And as a bit of background, artificial intelligence is a broad term commonly used to describe machine-based systems that infer how to make predictions, generate content, or act to achieve objectives. There is no universally accepted definition of artificial intelligence, but for policy purposes, AI system capabilities can be grouped into three broad categories: predictive, generative, and agentic. In practice, these categories can overlap as systems can have multiple capabilities. Modern AI systems present both opportunities and risks for state governments. Potential opportunities include improved citizen accessibility, operational efficiency, and enhanced decision support. Potential risks include systematic errors and biases in government decisions, privacy violations, and enhanced cybersecurity threats. States, including Virginia, are increasingly proposing legislation to mitigate AI risks to the broader public. But recent federal executive actions have created some uncertainty regarding the future scope of state AI regulation. Several state entities are involved in the management and oversight of information technology in the Commonwealth, including the Virginia Information Technologies Agency, the Office of Data Governance and Analytics, and the Joint Commission on Technology and Science. As part of our study, we'll be focusing on the following questions. How are Virginia state agencies using or planning to use AI systems? What challenges do agencies report encountering in their efforts to implement AI systems? What key opportunities and risks do AI systems present for state agencies? And is Virginia state government well positioned to implement responsible and trustworthy AI systems? We'll also be examining how legislators can identify the most substantial risks to the public from AI use outside of state government and address them through legislation where necessary. Lastly, we'll be reviewing what factors affect the cost and availability of AI systems and what their expected trends are in the near term, according to industry stakeholders and subject matter experts. This slide summarizes some of our planned research activities. These include interviews with Virginia state agencies, AI experts, and other stakeholders, a survey of Virginia State Agency Chief Information Officers, analyses of VITA's AI registry and procurement documents, and reviews of relevant laws and regulations, AI risk frameworks, and national research on AI systems. Madam Chair, that concludes my brief remarks, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Delegate Reed.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and Mr. Dickinson, thank you for this input. I do have a question or a comment because I think back on slide number 39, you had identified all of the different organizations that are already looking at artificial intelligence. And I know that as a member of the Joint Commission on Technology and Science, it's something that we've looked at before. So I'm hoping that through the process of you doing this, that there will be some respect and acknowledgement of the different lanes in the road so that we don't end up with duplicative efforts that are then going to provide the General Assembly with conflicting recommendations.
Delegate Reed, thank you for the comment. Yes, absolutely. We've already met with the JCOT staff twice, and we're on that. We feel like both of our studies and the way we're approaching it can provide value, and we're going to make sure we're not stepping on each other's toes and duplicating effort.
Delegate Price.
Thank you. I had a question just to make sure I understood. Is this internal systems and public facing, or just mostly like how they use it within the agency for their efficiencies?
Delegate Price, thanks for the question. We're looking at both internal and external. Both have important implications, and we feel like both are worth
And a
looking at.
follow-up, Madam Chair. Yep, just want to make sure, I guess it's not as much of a question as it is a request. In the national research on AI systems, there's a lot of information and research that can help guide us to learning about the disparate impacts on certain communities, whether it's the aging community where the use of AI is not as helpful, or those that may not be as literate with online systems and how that could impact it. I would love for that to be a part of what you're looking at.
Certainly. Thank you, Delegate Price.
Delegate Ware.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is somewhat akin to what Delegate Price asked, and that is, as I look at the bullet points on 40 and 41, it's largely directed toward in-house or state agencies. My concern is more on in the area of public health and safety in the wider constituency that we have. When I hear some of the warnings from some of the tech titans about these things, that's where my great concern is, and I hope the focus will include that wider scope.
Delegate Ware, yeah, we have one bullet on that, but sure, it's a big focus of our study to make sure we give you all some good information on what the risks are and how, as a legislature, we can you all can think about this and address them where necessary. So,
thank you, Madam Chair.
Any additional questions or comments?
Madam Chair.
Delegate Simon.
One question on the scope, and it's really a question, not a suggestion. You say state agencies, would you get to the courts, or would that be something different? The reason I ask is, we see occasionally we see some legal decisions and some opinions that hallucinate sections of the Constitution that weren't there and things like that. So suspect there may be some use of AI. Is that something you guys would be looking at, or would that be something I'd want to talk to the OES about?
Delegate Simon, thank you. This is focused on the executive branch, but I think some of the things that we come out with may be useful for that. But certainly in a future study, if you wanted us to look at that, we could do that.
Thank you.
Senator Pike.
Madam Chair, I appreciate it. I didn't want to give the House all of the questions this morning. But as a part of the study scope as well, I'm interested not only in state agencies, but also how the public interacts with AI and its influence on governance. As example, in January, I looked up ideas and concepts that were in bills. For instance, were they law? And if you were to fact check during that period, some AI-generated responses would state that Virginia has raised taxes, or Virginia has passed this. And so the auto-generated responses by AI actually gave false responses. So I'm just curious if that scope also includes how the public interacts with AI and its impact on governance.
Senator McPike, absolutely. Misinformation is one of the big risks that we've heard about, and I think that's in various, whether it's for that type of research or just individuals using it on a day-to-day basis, it's important to be aware of.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Additional questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll now turn it over to Ellen Miller.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. I'm Ellen Miller, and I'm our lead on JLARC's evaluation of economic development incentives. So for this function, I present two reports to you every year. The first one is an in-depth report of a small group of incentives, and we look at a different group of incentives every year. This year, we have evaluated, the group that we're evaluating focuses on film, media, and tourism incentives. And I'll present our findings and recommendations on that evaluation next month. And then in the fall, I'll present to you high-level information on spending across all incentives, performance of grants, and we focus on grants for this one because they're the ones with the performance metrics like job creation and capital investment. Every other year, this report includes estimates of the economic benefits across all incentives, and we'll include that in this year's report. Madam Chair, that concludes my brief overview of our incentives function. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
As usual, Delegate Reed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know that Senator McPike and everyone else is like, okay, we're really not looking forward to having these three new people on. Just me. Thank you. I did actually say to the speaker, I said, this gives me an opportunity to ask all of those pent-up questions. So thank you. The incentives, I do have a question about that because I know that when we're evaluating MEI investments from the Commonwealth, that we will oftentimes look at direct benefit, indirect, and induced benefits. Do you look at the same type of metrics when you're evaluating the benefit of these different incentive programs that we've approved?
Yes, Delegate, that is one of the factors that we look at. That's part of our analysis, yes, for the in-depth report. And then when I indicated the every other year in the overall summary report that we present in the fall, that is also included in that report as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. I will see you next month. And now I will turn it over to Alex to talk about her oversight responsibilities.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Alex Jansen, and I am an analyst with JLARC's ongoing oversight for the Virginia Retirement System, Commonwealth Savers Plan, and the Virginia Information Technologies Agency. This slide shows you our oversight activities planned for the Virginia Retirement System this year. At the July Commission meeting, we'll present an update on VRS and the investment performance. And also at that meeting, the VRS Director and Chief Investment Officer will present to you. At that same meeting, you will also hear from our independent actuaries the result of our quadrennial audit of VRS. And finally, in December, we'll provide an oversight report and update for you. We also have a number of oversight activities related to Commonwealth Savers this year. These include our biennial oversight report that we'll present at the July Commission meeting. And at that same meeting, you'll also hear from the Commonwealth Savers CEO and their chief and their investment officer. And finally, for the Virginia Information Technologies Agency, or VITA, at the October Commission meeting, you will have an annual update from their CIO. And Madam Chair, I can pause here for questions.
Delegate Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm racing Delegate Reed. Wanted to know, can we reasonably expect in July to be the time period when we would kind of get to see under the hood on the rate of return for the investments and also how they stack up against, say, neighboring states like Maryland?
Thank you, Delegate, for the question. I believe we will touch on that in our report, so we can certainly have that information.
Surprise, Delegate Reed.
Yeah. Yes, Madam Chair. To follow on to Delegate Thomas, I think it would also be beneficial to be able to see how the Commonwealth Savers Program is returning value as compared to VRS, so that we're not just comparing to other states' savings programs, but also to how it's comparing as far as return on investment. The other thing that I was going to ask, because we've had legislation on this over the last several sessions about the amount of the surplus and how to be able to allocate that. And I've looked at the recent JLARC report. Will there be any update on that we could expect at the June or July meeting?
Delegate, thank you. Yes, we will touch on the surplus and the recent legislation efforts around that in our biennial report for Commonwealth Savers. And I saw Kimberly reaching to unmute, so I will defer to her.
Yes, Delegate Reed, we will also be presenting information on the rate of return. So we will be able to compare VRS to Commonwealth Savers. The one thing I would say is that is a lot driven by the asset allocation, and so the two funds have different asset allocations, and so just because one has a higher or lower return or assumed return doesn't necessarily mean it's a good or bad thing. What's really most relevant is how they're doing vis-a-vis their benchmarks for the fund. But we will have that information for you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right. May the 4th be with you, and I will turn it back over to Kimberly.
Thank you, Alex. Madam Chair, I will briefly touch on the other areas under my supervision. JLARC provides racial and ethnic impact statements, which assess the impact on racial and ethnic disparities that could be created by proposed criminal justice legislation. According to the Code of Virginia, these can be requested by the House or Senate Courts of Justice chairs. This past session, we completed 4 racial and ethnic impact statements. JLARC also provides a number of fiscal analysis services for the General Assembly. We provide several annual reports related to the state's finances, which are listed here. And I just want to mention that this year's annual state spending report will include an additional analysis, which is the flow of revenue and expenditures between the state and localities. We also provide fiscal impact reviews, and the most common are the second opinions on the fiscal impact of proposed legislation that we provide during the session. These must be requested by the chair of the committee where the bill resides. This past session, we completed 5 fiscal impact reviews, some on fairly visible legislation like the collective bargaining bill and several gaming bills. And Madam Chair, that completes my update. I'm happy to answer any questions about JLARC's ongoing oversight or fiscal analysis services.
Any questions?
Okay. Cal will be back.
Okay, turn it back over to Hal.
We're almost to the end here. This slide 54 just shows the proposed meeting schedule for 2026. We just discussed it. The Economic Development Centers will be up next month, as well as APA will be back to talk to you about some of their prior results. Then in July, the meeting will focus on VRS and Commonwealth Savers. And then beginning in September, we'll present the findings from the 5 major studies that we're currently undertaking. In terms of future work, the final slide shows the 3 joint resolutions directing JLARC studies that were passed by the General Assembly during the 2026 session, and which will all be conducted in the calendar year 27. There's also 1 study from a 2025 joint resolution that we're directed to complete over the next 2 years. Even with these directed studies, there will be capacity for additional studies in 2027, and the Study Topic Selection Subcommittee will meet in the fall to assign additional work for next year. That concludes the presentation of the work plan. I'd be glad to answer any final questions anyone has. Otherwise, we need approval of the plan.
Any questions with regard to our work plan?
Move adoption of the plan.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we adopt the work plan for this year. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that plan's adopted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next is the presentation of the Auditor of Public Accounts work plan. For the members who are new to the commission, the Code of Virginia establishes that this commission should serve as the advisory agency for the APA. It should also serve as the entity through which the agency can present special reports and bring matters of significance to the attention of the General Assembly. Stacy Henshaw is the Auditor of Public Accounts, and I'd like to introduce Stacy at this time. Stacy?
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. As Hal indicated, I'm Stacy Henshaw, and I am the Auditor of Public Accounts. Eric Sandridge, my Deputy Auditor for Technology and Innovation, will be assisting me in the presentation. Today, we will be presenting our work plan for the upcoming year, and as Hal mentioned, in your oversight capacity of our agency, we will be requesting approval of our work plan. I'm also going to provide you with a brief update of our office relocation. We normally would also ask for you to approve our salary scales along with our work plan, and we are making some changes to the tiers in our salary scales to better reflect our organizational structure. In addition, our salary scales are usually connected to the budget and any increases that are there, and so we're going to defer presenting those scales until a later date. Now turning to our work plan. We're proposing just under 155,000 hours in our work plan, which is a slight increase from the prior year. This is made up of a mix of increases and decreases in various areas, and we're going to talk about those changes in future slides. This slide also shows our proposed hours for our audit support projects, which have remained relatively consistent with the prior year. And these audit support activities are not related to a specific audit, but are necessary to support our work plan projects. And these include items such as agency risk monitoring, development and updating of audit tools that our staff use, and also automation projects, so projects to increase our automation in the work that we do. This slide summarizes our hours by function, and most of the work that we perform is mandatory and doesn't significantly change from year to year. So I know a lot of you probably feel like from year to year you hear the same thing. We do try to mix it up a little bit and provide a little different details, but for our new members, hopefully this will be informative to you about the activities of our office. The focus of our work plan are audits that allow us to be able to provide assurance over the Commonwealth's financial statements and higher education institution financial statements, and also funds that the Commonwealth receives from the federal government. Most of the work is reflected in the executive department and in independent agencies and authorities that you will see on this slide. Who we audit doesn't vary a lot from year to year, but there can be some variations in what we audit at agencies. After performing our mandatory work, we use a risk-based approach in determining the work to perform with our remaining staff hours. And those risk-based projects are primarily shown in the cycle agency area that you see up there. And I'll briefly mention one area that we don't have a slide to cover with the remaining presentation, and that is our independent agencies, and that includes the financial statement audits of VRS and Lottery and ABC, as well as Commonwealth Savers. And our budget and plan work in this area is pretty much consistent with the prior year. Now to delve in a little more detail into specific areas. This slide details our budget for the work that we perform over local governments, local constitutional officers, and the Commonwealth's judicial system. This makes up about 10% of our work plan. We really don't have anything new in this area that we're covering this year, and the hours remain relatively stable. The comparative report preparation and fiscal distress monitoring that our office performs is vital to the Commonwealth. By far, it's the area where we receive the most inquiries from citizens as well as members. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail over that area today because that's something I'll be covering next month in our results presentation, where we'll dive a little bit more into what we do. The largest project in terms of budget in this area is the work that we perform over the Commonwealth's judicial system. We audit all of the district courts, general receivers, and magistrates annually, and so there are approximately 250 of those entities that we cover on an annual basis. We also audit approximately 100 of the Commonwealth Circuit Court clerks, and we do those audits. We're required by statute to do them at least once every 2 years, but right now we're covering them about every 18 months. The focus of these reviews is to enjoy and ensure that the judicial system has good internal controls over its financial operations. Surprisingly, this is an area that we also get a lot of inquiries about. But a lot of those inquiries tend to be more on the line of the judicial responsibilities of the court and not their financial activities. So obviously we don't have oversight over those activities. A lot of our discussion today is going to be centered around the executive branch agencies. This slide is showing our proposed budget hours by secretariat. The work that we perform in this area is over 75% of our work plan hours. As you can see, the bulk of our work is in the higher education, finance, and health and human resources area. Overall, the hours are up slightly from the prior year. We have about a 7,000 hour increase in our higher education institution audits, and that increase is offset by some decreases in the finance and health and human resource projects. And primarily those decreases are the result of federal programs coming out of cycle for the year or either being reclassified to other areas. One thing that I'll mention with this is with the exception of higher education, most of the hours that we budget here are for auditing business cycles that are significant to the Commonwealth's financial statements or federal programs that are in cycle. The only other thing that I'll mention is I think a lot of times people think if we say we're going in to audit health, that we're going to cover the entire agency or DMAS or behavioral health. And so the hours that we're proposing here are primarily hours that allow us to provide our opinion over the financial statements for the Commonwealth. So we are focusing on the significant activity that's required to be able to provide that opinion. Some agencies, the work that we're doing is covering most of what they do, like a Department of Treasury. We really delve into, they have a lot of material activity. But others have a lot of a mix of activities, and so we don't necessarily cover all of their business cycles. While they're not necessarily the largest drivers of the Commonwealth's budget, they can still be significant. The reason we can't go in and do everything and all the big cycles is because we don't have the resources to do that. And so we have been looking for ways to cover more things, more cycles in recent years. And so last year we piloted a program at the Department of Corrections that allowed us to look over at their procurement cycle. And so that program is what we call an ICQ, an internal control questionnaire audit. And so this year we're going to pilot a similar areas at DMAS as well as behavioral health. And so we're hoping with this, it will allow us to get in and get an idea how controls are working over those cycles. And so that work is not governed by the same standards that we have to follow when we do the financial statement audit and issue an opinion. So we're able to get in there and do the work faster. About half of our work plan helps to support the audit of the Commonwealth's financial statements and our audit of federal funds. And so what you see up there is a copy of the Commonwealth's financial statements. They're about 370 pages, and we pretty much are providing some level of assurance on almost all of the information that it contains. Our objectives related to auditing the financial statements are to issue an opinion on whether the financial statements accurately presents the Commonwealth's financial activities in accordance with accounting principles and whether there are adequate internal controls over the Commonwealth's financial operations. We have a December 15th statutory deadline to complete that audit, and so we wrap up this project right before the holidays, so it's a nice natural break for our staff to be able to take some time off over the holidays. We perform work at over 20 different agencies to support the audit of the Commonwealth's financial statements. The next two slides show some of the areas that we cover. This slide is showing assets and liabilities. We audit cash and investments, infrastructure, various receivables and payables, pension and OPEB liabilities, and debt of the Commonwealth. From a revenue and expense perspective, we audit tax revenue. We audit investment income as well. On the expense side, we audit payroll, educational, individual and family service, and transportation-related expenses. And we also audit revenues and expenses associated with the Commonwealth's business-type activities like ABC and lottery, as well as the retirement system. Our focus of the single audit is major federal programs, and so these are the larger programs that the Commonwealth receives funding for. We audit major programs on a 3-year cycle, and we can also pull in smaller programs that we determine are higher risk. The objective of this report is to ensure that the Commonwealth has complied with federal guidelines and has adequate internal controls over these programs. And we also ensure that the amounts reported to the federal government on the schedule of federal expenses are accurate in relation to the amounts reported in the financial statements. Because we have elected to report and to include our internal control report for the Commonwealth's financial statements into the required single audit report, we're required by auditing standards to issue our single audit within 60 days of the date that we issue our opinion on the ACFR. And so hence our February 13th deadline and our Valentine's Day celebration. And so it's really an intense period for our staff to have two deadlines with a lot of work that our office does very close together. And so, February 14th is a little bit extra special in our office for our staff. And so we usually have some sort of event to celebrate that we've kind of made it through the busiest part of our work plan year. This slide shows the federal programs that we're planning to audit for the upcoming year. We audit different programs every year, and typically our largest programs are audited on a 3-year cycle. We are required to audit Medicaid every year since it's been designated as a high-risk program by the federal government. We did audit TANF last year, but we have to pull it again this year because we had a material weakness in internal control over their reporting to the federal government, and we also qualified the opinion on that program. And so as a result, we're required to pull it back in another year. The other thing that I'll just say is while most of these programs are set for the year, depending on whether the Commonwealth meets certain expense thresholds, some of these programs could actually fall out. And so the ones we've included in here are the ones that we believe will reach that threshold by year end, and most of them already have. Also, if we had a program that we determined was higher risk, we could pull that in as well. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Eric.
Thank you, Stacy. Madam Chair, members of the Commission, as Stacy mentioned, I'm Eric Sandridge, Deputy Auditor for IT and Innovation at the APA. As Stacy noted on a previous slide, higher ed's a big part of the work that we do. It is over half the hours that we spend in the executive branch, about 43% of our total work plan. Most of the reason for that, and you'll see on the coming slides, is financial statement audits. Financial statement audits are driven by the auditing and accounting standards that are there, and they take a lot of time to get through to make sure that we can issue an opinion and that we're following the standards like we should. One thing that's important to note here is that these budgets do tend to grow year after year. One of the reasons for that is that standards usually come in, but they don't usually come out. And so there is an addition here, an additive thing that happens every year when you have a new standard. This year we have GASB Statement 103. It's a financial reporting model improvement standard. So what that means in layman's terms is they're changing the way the statements look. So they're going to move some things around. They're going to change how certain revenues and expenses might be classified in the statements. Those types of things usually take extra time when we have to pick them up and also when the institutions have to pick them up. So it does add some time each year as part of those budgets. This slide will also mention it includes about 400 hours for our work on our higher education comparative report. That's a study that we release every few years that shows each of our institutions grouped across different buckets and analyzes financial ratios to determine, generally speaking, how sound they are from a financial perspective. Going into those budgets a little deeper, this year we have the federal R&D program at our institutions of higher education. It's about 2,400 hours related to that work. Our work also will include 1,700 hours related to our required NCAA agreed upon procedures engagements, an additional 3,000 hours to support institutions' reaffirmation of accreditation. That happens at the 5-year and 10-year mark, and so I'll talk a little bit in more detail about how that variability can affect our work. As Stacy mentioned, we also are trying to be innovative where we can. A lot of our work is mandatory. A couple years ago, we started an ICQ project at our community college system. The community college system has very large institutions like your Northern Virginia Community College, Tidewater Community College, and very small ones. And so we want to make sure that we're getting some sense of how the community college institutions are doing and not just looking at the big ones. And so this is kind of our answer to that, is making sure that we're going in and periodically assessing how are they doing at the individual institution level. So when we're looking at changes in our higher ed area from the prior year, you'll see we have a net increase of about 2,000 hours for federal related work. Like all federal programs, we typically do these on a cyclical basis. So last year was an off year for higher ed, and the year before we had financial aid. So some of this is a little bit of a nuance of how the work comes in and out of our work plan each year. But this year we see that increase as it relates to federal research and development. The 2,200 hours that you see related to accreditation, This really has to do with the variability in that work. Each institution has its own 10-year cycle for reaffirmation of accreditation, and so we're not in control of that. The accreditation body is in control of that, and so when they are up for reaccreditation, we have to perform our work to align with that schedule. And so this is primarily financial aid work that we would do at our community colleges. And so we have 8 financial aid audits that we're going to go do this year compared to 3 last year. We also have 6 reviews, financial reviews that we'll perform at our community colleges. These are less in scope than an audit, but a required part of that reaffirmation of accreditation process. So again, it's just a variability thing that happens when those come in cycle. The other thing I want to point out is we are performing a separate audit of Richard Bland College this year. This relates to the legislation that was passed in the 2025 session to separate Richard Bland formally from William & Mary. So they have their own board now. They will publish separate financial statements, so we will do a separate audit there. So there is a net increase overall. This will be the first year, so we expect it's going to take a little more time. Hopefully, the number of hours required to do that will decline as we move and mature over the next few years. Touching briefly on our cycled agencies, we've presented information about this process in previous years, but we generally divide our cycled agencies into Pool 1, a low-risk pool, and Pool 2, a higher-risk pool. Pool 1 includes roughly 70 agencies. We do an internal control questionnaire at those agencies. Typically happens once every 3 years. We have 17 that we plan to do for this year, and I'm going to show those on a coming slide. They generally take less time. As Stacy mentioned, they're not governed by the same standards as a financial statement audit, so we're able to get in and perform our work and do more entities overall than we would when we're doing a financial statement audit. Pool 2 is a financial-related performance audit, if you will. These are our higher-risk entities, maybe due to changes in spending, changes in programs, changes in organizational structure. They can also include audits related to federal compliance for entities that we aren't auditing during the Commonwealth's financial statement audit. So these are our smaller agencies that may have material federal funding, but that aren't material to the Commonwealth's financial statements. I know that's a little bit of a nuance there. So these are the ICQ reviews that we're performing for those Pool 1 entities this year. Again, 17 of those, and generally speaking, were last performed 3 years ago. And our Pool 2 agency audits this year, you'll see Museum of Fine Arts, Rail and Public Transportation, Supreme Court, State Bar, and then federal compliance. Some of those agencies may change, and again, as Stacy mentioned, we'll be watching spending very closely through June 30th because that will govern which federal programs ultimately end up in the list to be audited. And so some will not cross the threshold that we expect to cross the threshold, and there may be some surprises where agencies spend more than maybe we're expecting. Just highlighting 2 areas in our special project part of our budget, Commonwealth Data Point, which is the state's transparency website for spending that our office operates. And then new this year, the Virginia Birth-Related Neurological Injury Compensation Program and Fund. So really just what I want to highlight on Data Point is that we've been operating Data Point since its inception. Over time, the hours in this area have decreased to maintain it. We originally built it in-house. We would like to modernize it and make it more useful, add functionality to it, so it's on our radar to revamp it. But we're aware that as we go into this area, it might require some additional support for us to do that, particularly if we have to go outside and try to get some additional resources external to our organization. The other piece of this is trying to be mindful of the ADA accessibility requirements that recently have been delayed until next year at the federal level, but making sure that we're incorporating that as a critical element when we go to revamp the system so that folks can use it the way they should be able to. For the Virginia Birth-Related Neurological Injury Compensation Program, our work plan includes hours to review any audit related to the fund. We've already received the three most recent sets of statements related to the fund. Obviously, this was just passed in the 2026 session as Chapter 1083. We envision doing some analysis similar to what we do at the local level, so putting it into our risk model and seeing, what comes out from a financial perspective, and that will be communicated as part of a required annual communication to the Governor and General Assembly. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Stacy to talk about what's very exciting in our office relocation.
So I will pause in the event that there are any questions that you had along the way.
Delegate Reed, are we surprised?
My feelings would have been hurt.
So yes, Madam Chair, and actually it's a question for Deputy Auditor Sandridge related to higher education, or for you, and it's two questions. One is, do you have to provide additional audit support and analysis for our R1 universities? For the R1, the Research 1 universities. And then the second question is, I know that JLARC has done a report recently on VMSDEP, and I'm just curious now whether or not, with that report having been done, whether or not there is an audit side or function of how the ongoing funding of VMSDEP affects the finances of the 16 public universities.
I'll let you handle that, Eric.
So to answer your first question related to the R1, so a lot of those research hours that you're seeing relate specifically to the R1 institutions. They tend to be our bigger audits because of what they do and the breadth of what they do. So in terms of additional support, I would say we certainly spend more time there. The nature of the audit process is similar, but what we audit is vastly different when you're looking at an R1 versus some of our baccalaureate institutions. With regard to the Military Survivors Dependent Education Program, we have that work gets incorporated as part of some of the work that we do on waivers, and it's really more of there's a financial aspect to it, how it gets classified in the financial statements. But as those dollars have grown, we have been incorporating more procedures by necessity to make sure that those are reported properly. Some of that includes a compliance aspect in making sure that the rules around that program are working the way they should be at the individual institutions. So hopefully that answers your question.
Delegate Price.
Thank you. I wanted to know a little bit more about, I guess, the types of things you look into for Medicaid. I definitely understand like direct payments, but would it be part of the scope of your audit of Medicaid to include the impact of the error rate on the state budget, or is it just the actual flow of direct payments to providers or for services?
And so it is primarily related to the payments that flow out. We are required, because it is, like I mentioned earlier, required to be audited for federal compliance every year. And so there are federal compliance requirements that are specific to eligibility, and matching, those types of things that we have to perform every year. And so we do delve into that activity as well. And some of that is partnered with our social service audit, because eligibility is determined at the local level through our social services. So some of that is done in tandem with that project as well. We do look at error rates when we're doing that work, though. It's not something that we don't completely review, and so it is something that comes into the scope of our project.
I have one quick question. As it relates to when you're doing your evaluations of reaffirmation of accreditation, is that inclusive of individual programs like teacher education or counseling programs that have separate accreditations?
No, so this will be institutional accreditation at the global level and not at the program level.
Additional questions? Okay. I was looking at you, Reed. Okay.
I wanted to give you a brief update today on our office relocation. As some of you may remember, last year we requested authorization to enter into a lease for office space since no state space was identified for our relocation from the James Monroe building. And like Eric mentioned, this has been kind of an exciting time for our office because after 45 years, as of last week, we have moved into new office space at Riverfront Plaza. We had been in the James Monroe building since it opened in 1981, and we were the only legislative agency there. And so we had been there a really long time. It's amazing what you will find when you've been somewhere for 45 years. And so this was our original layout, and we thought that was really neat. We want to frame it in our new location. We also found some historical documents, and we reached out to some other agencies, and they were interested in them. And so I know OAG, we had some old OAG opinions back to the 1930s in really good shape, hardbound, and they jumped right on those when we asked them if they wanted them. So it was kind of like a treasure hunt as we cleaned out our space. This next slide shows our office relocation timeline. Basically, the process took about 9 months after we signed our lease. We worked with DGS throughout the process. One of their real estate division staff was assigned to our project. They helped us identify the potential space for our office. They reviewed our lease and helped us with that process. They attended all of our meetings and also the walkthroughs that we had of our space throughout the way. And so we're very appreciative of the support that they provided to our office as an executive branch, as a legislative branch agency. The other thing that I'll point out is that the contractor and furniture vendors that we use for our space are contractors that the Commonwealth has utilized in the past for state-owned space. And so, in fact, the main contractor on our project is working with other state agencies that are moving out of Monroe into state space. So, so they were very familiar to DGS and had been used before. We recently had a statewide meeting, and our theme for our office-wide meeting was embracing the future. And so we had an AI session and a couple of sessions related to AI, but also, we're focused on modernizing our space. For a long time, we felt like our space really didn't match how we operated as an organization. Because it was, we basically had the same furnishings that we'd had since 1981. We literally had the same partitions and same desks that we had since then. When we first toured our future space at Riverfront, it was already designed just as we had envisioned wanting a space. It has a very open floor plan. The number one thing that our staff requested in a floor plan was for them to have more access to natural light. Our old space, they didn't have any access to windows, and it was very, it had partitions all in it. And so we feel like we got lucky. A company had renovated the space and moved out after 1 year. And so we were able to utilize a lot of what was done. When we signed our lease, it was probably 50 to 60% ready for us. We didn't have to renovate the entire floor, and we were able to save time and money. The top left picture that we're showing is the east side of our floor, and it is an area that had not been previously renovated, so we did have to have demolition and renovation in that area. The top right is showing the west side of our floor that was primary complete. All we had to do is add a couple of offices, but we were able to reutilize all the carpet and most of the office space in that side. And the bottom picture kind of shows a mix of the area we had to demo and then the area that was already in place that we were able to utilize. And this slide shows our finished product. It has our entrance in the top left-hand corner. Those top two pictures are our training room, and this is particularly important for our office. We're required by standards to provide continuing professional education to our staff, 40 hours every year, and so with 130 staff, that's a lot of training that we have to do. And so it was very important for us to have a training space that met our needs. One of the things you'll see up there is that we incorporated a removable glass wall so we can expand. It backs up to our break room, so if we need to have a larger training session, we're able to open that wall and expand it, which we hope will save us on cost of having to use outside space. We don't have traditional cubicle space. We function in a team environment, and so we feel like this is better for our staff collaboration. And it also means that we are very efficient with our use of space in terms of the number of people that we have within the space that we have. In fact, we've had other agencies come down that had multiple floors and were surprised when we said with 130 people that we can fit everybody onto one floor. And as you can see, we have kind of a pod pod design for our offices. So the two bottom pictures are two of our audit collaboration areas where our team members sit. I mentioned we had the same desk and partition since 1981, so we did purchase new furniture for the space. That was the biggest expense to the Commonwealth, was related to our furnishings. The building owner covered all but a small portion of our construction costs as part of our lease, and so the main outlay was the furnishings. We were able to give our staff more modern workstations where they can just plug in. Cord management we have loved having cord management. Otherwise, we were tripping over all these cords and cabling, and so the staff just love that they can show up to work and just plug into a docking station and aren't kicking cords around. And so we did obviously modernize our internet and our AV areas. We were able to incorporate some additional meeting rooms because our staff don't have offices. Having a lot of meeting rooms is very important to us so they can pop over and have meetings when needed. And the number one thing I think that they love is that we finally have a break room. We never had a break room in our floor in the James Monroe building. And so literally people clean their lunch dishes and coffee mugs out in the bathroom every day. So we are extremely appreciative, and our staff are very appreciative that we've been allowed to have the opportunity to move in this space, and really believe it's going to help us from a retention and recruitment perspective in the future. And we would love to have anybody visit that would like to come tour our space.
I have a question here.
Yes.
Vice Chair Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you. It's a great report, Stacy. Thank you. Can you just review for me where your leased space is?
It's in Riverfront Plaza, which is it's over on the James River, and so it's two towers basically. So it's just a couple blocks.
So that's like at 9th and...
Bird Street.
All right.
Bird Street.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
And one thing that I will say is, obviously, a lot of the agencies are dispersed now that we're in the James Monroe building, and so we are maintaining some parking that is close to the Capitol area to be able to navigate around to the audits that we're performing.
Thank you.
Move to adopt the work plan.
It's a motion to adopt the work plan. Moved and seconded that we approve proposal of the 2027 work plan for APA. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Plan's
Thank you.
adopted. Thank you. We will now move down to, turn it over to you, Hal.
Madam Chair, that concludes the agenda for the day. Our next meeting will be, it's on Wednesday, not on Monday, Wednesday, June 3rd. So we look forward to seeing you then.
Oh, we did good today. Okay, so thank you all so very much for being here, and I would again like to welcome our new members, Delegates Simon, Price, Thomas, and Reed, and Senator Obenshane. Thank you all for agreeing to serve on JLARC. Welcome. We appreciate you being here today. And as Hal mentioned, in the fall, we will be convening the study topic subcommittee, and I've asked Senator McPike to chair that committee, so you may be voluntold to serve on that topic subcommittee, so look forward to that. And if there's no further business or questions from Senator Reed, we will adjourn.
Thank you for joining us. This concludes this broadcast of the Senate of Virginia in Richmond, Virginia. is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B 306. Be sure to stay connected with live sessions, catch up on past meetings, and explore our full archives anytime on the Senate of Virginia's YouTube channel. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B 306. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B 306. Be sure to stay connected with live sessions, catch up on past meetings, and explore our full archives anytime on the Senate of Virginia's YouTube channel. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B 306. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia.